All right, guys, as a reminder, we talked in class when we were doing our meeting. We talked that our special cases happen in reflection and rotation. That's when I flip the numbers, X and Y flip signs. And then not only they switch sides, but they also flip signs. So reflection and rotation are special cases, and those are given in the notes. So make sure you do take a look at the formulas. Now, when it comes to translation and dilation, things totally change. The values totally change. In translation, I'm going to be adding or subtracting values. In dilation, I'm going to be multiplying by the scale factor. So the values are totally going to change. But once again, the special cases in reflection and rotation, those are included in the notes. So looking at question number one, for today's case, we're going to be looking at to find the coordinates or the vertices of each figure after the given composition of transformations. What I mean with composition of transformation is we're going to be doing more than one transformation. This case, we're going to be doing two. So, for example, let's take a look at question number one. I'm going to rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. So, if I look on the notes, 90 degrees counterclockwise, it tells me that xy becomes negative y x. So with that, I know that not only the x and the y are going to flip, but the sign on the y value is going to change the sign. So if I'm looking at I prime, so remember, flip the numbers, x and y are going to switch, but the sign from the y value, you're going to switch the sign. And what I mean with the y value, in this case, is this negative 3. My answer will be 3, 3. If I look at J prime, my answer will be 2, 4. And if I'm looking at K prime, my answer is 4, 5. Not only did the X and the Y flip, but the sign on the original Y value, if you notice, on each of those numbers, I switched the sign. And I switched the sign on the Y value because it says negative Y. All right, so now I take a look at the second transformation. In this case, it says rotation 180 about the origin, 180 degrees about the origin. So for that one, when I look on the notes, it says that rotation 180, xy becomes negative x, negative y. What that means is I'm just going to switch the signs on the x and the y values. So if I'm looking at I double prime, my answers will be negative 3, negative 3. If I'm looking at J double prime, I'm going to have negative 2, negative 4. And my coordinates of K double prime are going to be negative 4, negative 5. I changed the sign on the X and the Y values. Notice how at the beginning, when I did the first transformation, I'm going to take a look at I. When I did the first transformation, I call it I prime. When I did the second transformation, I call it I double prime. So on your homework, you're going to be asked to find the coordinates of double primes. If I was asking, so keep in mind, if I'm asking on the homework, I'm going to ask for a specific point. If I was asking for the coordinates of I prime, I'm just expecting the coordinates of I double prime. You don't have to type in I double prime and then the coordinates. Just give me the coordinates of the point that I'm asking. Don't forget that after the comma, don't forget your parentheses first of all, and don't forget that after the little comma, there's a little space. If I was asking for J double prime, just give me the coordinates of the point that I'm asking. All right, let's take a look at question number 2 now. Question number 2, translation 4 units down. Okay, so since I'm not moving sideways, I'm just moving down, but not sideways. That tells me that I'm going to leave the x value alone. I'm not moving sideways. Now, 4 units down, I'm going to represent that as y minus 4. So that means I'm going to leave the x value alone because I'm not moving sideways. And the y value, I'm going to subtract 4. Okay, so if I was looking at w and I wanted to find w prime, my value will be -5, -3. I left the x alone. I subtracted from y. So y minus 4, 1 minus 4 gave me -3. Now, if I was looking at x prime, remember, leave the x alone and subtract 4 from y. If I was looking at y prime, my value would be 0, -1, and z prime, it would be 0, -2. Once again, I left the x alone and subtracted 4 from y. Now, for my second transformation, I'm going to be looking at rotation 180 degrees about the origin. When I look on my notes, it says 180 is -x, -y. xy becomes -x, -y, so all I'm going to do is switch the signs. So if I'm looking at w prime, my answer would be 5, 3. Notice I switched the sign on the x and I switched the sign on the y. If I'm looking at x double prime, my answer would be 5, -1. If I'm looking at y double prime, my answer would be 0, 1. There is no such thing as a -0. So that's why 0 stays a 0, because I cannot switch the sign on that one. And lastly, if I'm looking at z double prime, my answer would be 0, 2. Once again, there's no such thing as -0. Simple as that. Let's take a look at a couple more examples. I'm going to look at question number 3. First one, it says rotation 180 degrees about the origin. I look on my notes. The formulas, once again, they're included on your notes. So rotation 180, it says xy becomes -x, -y. So all I'm going to do is switch the signs. So if I'm looking at I prime, my answer would be -1, -2. If I'm looking at j prime, my answer would be -2, -5. If I'm looking at k prime, it would be -4, -4. If I'm looking at L prime, will be -3, -2. All I did was switch the signs. Now, my second transformation, it says reflection across the x-axis. Now, reflection across the x-axis, according to our notes, it says that xy becomes x, -y. So don't do anything to the x, just switch the sign on the y. So if I'm looking at I double prime, my answer would be -1, +2. Don't do anything to the x, just switch the sign on the y. If I was looking at j double prime, my answer would be -2, 5. If I'm looking at k double prime, I'm going to have -4, +4. And lastly, L double prime will be -3, +2. All right, guys, our last example, let's take a look at question number 4. First, when it says reflection across the y-axis. I look on our notes and it says reflection across the y-axis, xy becomes -x, +y. So all I'm going to do is switch the sign on the x. Okay, so if I was looking at s prime, my values will be 2, -3. Right, I switch the sign on the x. If I'm looking at t prime, I'm going to have 2, 0. If I'm looking at u prime, I will have -3, -3. And if I'm looking at v prime, it gives me 1, -5. All I did was switch the sign on the x value. For my second transformation, it says translation, 2 units right. Okay, so 2 units to the right, that goes along the x-axis. So I'm just going to go x plus 2. Right? If I was moving to the left, I would have said minus. But I'm moving to the right, so x plus 2. Now, 2 units down, that has to deal with the y-axis. Because it is going down, I'm going to go y minus 2. So I'm going to add 2 to x, and I'm going to subtract 2 from y. All right, so let's take a look at s. If I was looking at S double prime, right, I'm starting here now. So add 2 to X, so that gives me 4. Subtract 2 from Y, negative 3 minus 2 gives me negative 5. Good, let's take a look at T double prime. Add 2 to X, so that gives me 4. Subtract 2 from Y, that gives me negative 2. Now looking at U double prime, that gives me negative 1, negative 5. And lastly, V double prime, that gives me 3, negative 7. So now for this homework, composition of transformations is we're going to do more than one transformation per question. In this case, we're doing 2. The homework, once again, I'm only going to ask for a specific point. Here for the lecture, I did a bunch of points. But on the homework, I'm going to ask for the coordinates of a specific point per question.